V2. And that's why the V2 was still relatively inaccurate. Also von Braun and our military boss Dornberger tried to develop with the V2, with the A4, I should say, a very accurate weapon, which has a relatively small target area, and that had not been accomplished. And in order to do that, and the Redstone finally did it, the warhead was separated. During the war, you probably don't care too much about the booster anyway, so you let the booster fall wherever it happens to fall, and it's a loss. And of course, most of our launch vehicles today are still of the type. The Redstone engine is really a considerable improvement of the V2 engine. Our chief engineer, Walter Riedel, had fairly soon left the group, the von Braun team, and had joined North American, which was at that time, I should really say, the Rocketdyne division of North American. And that was at that time a part of the North American Aviation Company. And they wanted to develop the first big Air Force vehicle. And they wanted to have an improved V2 engine, really, for that, which later on became the Redstone engine. And they did it, they developed it for the Navajo project. Somebody may have mentioned the Navajo project to you already. And when the Navajo finally folded, the engine was still available. And von Braun decided at that time not develop our own new engine here in this country, but to buy the Redstone engine from North American. And I was actually in charge of this contract, so I worked for a number of years very closely with NAA. I was employed by the Army, but I, in a way, bought the engine from North American to be used for the Redstone vehicle, and the same was later on done for the Jupiter engine. And on the basis of the Jupiter engine, von Braun could make at that time the proposals that you, I'm sure, have heard about in Collier's magazine, where he proposed to build with that type of engine, a swiveling engine now, a three-stage vehicle, according to Overt's initial proposal, to really go to the moon with it. That the Saturn was really started by the Army. So it was not initially a NASA project. In fact, NASA, when the Saturn program was started, did not even exist. And our commanding general at that time, John Bruce Medeiros, he wanted to go to the moon. He wanted to observe the Earth from the moon. People had not thought of spy satellites. Today, of course, we observe what's happening down here with spy satellites or satellites in general, and people had not thought of it. It was before any satellite had been launched, and so he wanted to go to the moon to observe the Earth from the moon. And of course, he needed a relatively large launch vehicle, and he gave von Braun the task to use existing components. And that's why the booster of the Saturn V looks so complicated. The tanks that you see in the first stage are basically Redstone tanks. In the center there is a Jupiter tank. The Redstone and the Jupiter had been developed already. The tanks are a little bit extended, they're a little bit longer, and the engines on the Saturn I are basically Jupiter engines. And the Army did not have enough funding to really start from scratch and do what we later on did for the Saturn V. So that's why they made this makeshift solution. And the purpose was, of course, to develop a large launch vehicle. And of course, people realized that the Saturn I is not big enough to go all the way to the moon. And for that reason, the Army started the Saturn I, Saturn II, Saturn III, Saturn IV, and even the Saturn V. When Kennedy said later on, let's go to the moon, it was clear that we did not need all these intermediate stages. So that's why we today have only a Saturn I and a somewhat improved version with a bigger second stage, which you see here, the third stage really of the Saturn V. And that's a Saturn 1B, which is an improved Saturn I version. And then, of course, a big step was to develop new engines and new stages for the Saturn V in order to go to the moon. And that, of course, was for the von Braun team a real major step. And I think this had been von Braun's dream all along.